afternoon. My name is Hilborn. I finance and develop raise AI data centers through my company, Regenerative Infrastructure Holdings. And this means that I live at that physical and capital there that needs to exist before any of us is possible. And so this panel will please today. We're going to be covering 3 topics today over 50 minutes: the cost, compute, and economics of agentic AI and Nebulai scale. So what does that mean? It's not infomost, it's the actual infrastructure reality. First, we're going to talk about inference, economics, what it actually costs to run agents at scale, and where the ROI is real versus where it quietly business. And can I ask everyone in the back, please, if you hear someone talking, to please ask them to go outside. If you can hear me, clap once. And you can hear me, clap twice. Awesome. I also used to be a 6th grade teacher. Also, thank you for that. The second topic, we're going to talk about the adoption gap, why enterprise deployment is slower than every forecast predicted. And finally, we're going to talk about the infrastructure bottleneck, the silent barriers that nobody engineers for until it's too late to bury your stuff. So let me introduce some of my panel. Vishal Ganeriwala. Vishal leads product strategy, human marketing, and GTM strategy for DGX Cloud at NVIDIA, the person in the room who knows the real cost curve better than anyone. Before NVIDIA, he was VP of product marketing at Citrix. Secondly, we have Ariel Deschapell. Ariel is the CTO at hydrahost. They're building an operating system for independent AI data centers, a direct evidence to the hyperscale.
It's like the lights are lifting.
So for most GPU capacity, between the chip and an application layer, which makes you see where production deployments fail in ways that will skip down. And finally, last but not least, we have Renatto Garro. Renatto is co-founded Nebulai and built the Agentic to Human protocol, a framework for enterprise decision-making where AI agents and humans hand off to each other in exactly the right moment. So he spent 60 years at Google Cloud and Microsoft as a field CTO before becoming a founder, which means he has been on our side of enterprise AI at scale. So I want to visit the rules. If you are a technical AI person, raise your hand. Or a non-technical AI person, raise your hand. Okay, wonderful. And if you are just starting off for a journey, raise your hand. Okay, so we have most people in the audience are non-technical AI, so that will help us in conversation today. Okay, so the first round is inference economics. So Renatto, you built the A2H protocol because pure agent automation breaks down at a certain decision threshold. Where does that threshold sit economically, and at what cost per decision does the human entity layer become the bottleneck instead of the safety net?
Yeah, so since we have people from technical and non-technical, just a little like contextual side of the conversation. So let's start with agents. So agents are autonomous systems that can execute a task end to end, and sometimes it does need human before the loop, during the loop, and after the loop. So when an agent is executing something, there is a component where some agents for specific industries may need to, let's say, delegate the task to a human. For example, think about maybe you're running a loan application process throughout a bank, right? And then they have an AI system that can determine whether you get the loan or not. Maybe in some scenarios with low confidence, you want the agent to delegate the task to a human so the human can review that loan application before you get approved. That's just one quick example. Another example could be an accounting firm. Maybe they're running your taxes, and maybe at the end you want a human to review the tax filing before the agent can file it to the IRS. Those are some examples. So it's an interesting question because like when you're creating this multi-agentic systems or agent networks, you have to find that sweet spot where the human needs to be involved without adding too much complexity into the system. And this is something that we actually have a framework for. So I brought it up at the Emerge conference I was last week, which is basically like, think about like you have like a horizontal axis, so you have low work complexity to high work complexity, and then low data complexity to high data complexity on the vertical axis. And then from zero, you draw like a diagonal line from zero to high human in the loop. And then that determines basically if you start mapping your business processes or your use cases, you determine if you are like on the lower left quadrant, it requires very little human in the loop. And if you're on the top right quadrant, it requires more human in the loop. So that's a quick way to determine where you should find that threshold to include human in the loop. So like if you're moving from the middle of that diagram up, you probably should be looking into including human in the loop. The examples I gave would be on the top right quadrant. So examples that are very simple and highly easy to automate, maybe not require any human in the loop. And I would say token-wise, the more you need human in the loop, I think the more loops you need to have in your agentic system to verify that interaction. So I think they are probably going to have an increased number of token usage. That would be my intuition.
Thank you for that lovely answer. All right, Ariel, founders are watching their inference bills closely. You're building infrastructure designed to undercut hyperscaler pricing. What's the single biggest lever for improving cost to performance that most teams aren't pulling, and why is it being left on the table?
Yeah, hi, good question. So I work with a variety of AI scale-ups, enterprises who are asking those exact same questions every day. There's a lot of things that go into what we call price performance, right? So it's how much are you paying for the performance you're getting out of AI. And the most important thing to consider first, kind of very high level, is where you as a customer, as a company, as a user actually sit in the technical stack, and where do you want to sit, right? Because there's different ways of paying for AI. You can pay an inference service, for API default. You can rent virtual machines. You can rent bare metal, run your own inference services on that, right? And there's no right answer to approach it, because at each of those levels of the stack, you're getting a trade-off of price versus maybe flexibility versus maybe convenience, developer tooling, etc. So different solutions make sense to different companies and different users. For the enterprise use case, more and more, if you expect that you have a threshold of basic demand, it's going to be a lot more economical to rent your own bare metal and to run your own AI models, essentially self-hosting on this software, right? And the corollary to that would be, well, if you're just a startup or small, you probably won't have the cash to go out and rent a bare metal GPU, right? That could be $4 a GPU times 8 on each server. It's quite a lot of money, right? So you're going to pay a lot more per cost. But that's okay per API call if you're not using that many API calls, right? So it's kind of like a Costco model versus, or you go to Whole Foods, right? It depends who you are, it depends what your needs are, it depends about the volume that you're buying at. If you're a large volume buyer, you want to be the Costco buyer, that's bare metal. And if you're not, then you're somewhere else higher off the sky, basically outsourcing that complexity, outsourcing that overhead, so you can focus on your total cost, but your per unit economics are not as great.
Thank you very much. All right. Okay, when enterprises calculate AI ROI, what's the metric they're getting wrong? And what should they be measuring instead?
That's a great question. First of all, thank you everyone for coming over here.